The lucky hand. The air in the saloon was thick enough to choke on. Sweat and stale beer mingled with the scent of cheap cigars, clinging to Dusty's clothes like a second skin. He hadn't planned on staying this late, hadn't even planned on playing poker, but Jed had badgered him into it, claiming Dusty needed to loosen up. Now, hours later, a small mountain of chips sat in front of him, a testament to a luck he couldn't quite believe. He glanced at Jed, who was nursing a whiskey at the bar, his face etched with a mixture of disbelief and thinly veiled envy. Dusty felt a pang of guilt, but the thrill of the game, the quiet confidence that had settled in his gut, pushed it aside. The pot was enormous. Silas, the burly blacksmith with a reputation for a fiery temper, pushed in the last of his chips. Across from him, Hank, the traveling salesman, did the same, his eyes narrowed, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. All eyes turned to Dusty. He held 2 queens in his hand, already feeling a familiar heat rising in his chest. 2 more lay face up on the table. For queens. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. He barely understood the intricacies of the game, mostly relying on instinct and a healthy dose of beginner's luck. He looked at the 2 men, their faces grim. He almost wanted to fold, to give them a chance, but the memory of his own empty pockets, the endless hours of back-breaking work on the ranch, spurred him on. "I'm in," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. He pushed his entire stack forward. Silas cursed under his breath, throwing his cards down in disgust. Hank hesitated, his gaze darting between Dusty and the pile of chips. Finally, with a sigh of defeat, he tossed his cards onto the table as well. Dusty revealed his hand. A gasp rippled through the saloon. For queens. He raked in the chips, the weight of them almost unbelievable. It was more money than he'd seen in his entire life. The initial excitement quickly faded, replaced by an unsettling unease. The room felt different now, the air heavier, the glances more pointed. Murmurs started to snake through the crowd. He caught snippets of conversation, hushed whispers about an auction, a woman, a debt. Lily, terrible situation. That bastard husband of hers. Auctioning her off like chattel. Dusty frowned. He didn't understand. An auction? For a woman? In this day and age? It sounded like something out of a dime novel, not something that could actually happen. He looked around, trying to find the source of the whispers. He saw a group of men huddled in a corner, their faces grim, their voices low. He couldn't make out the details, but he caught the name Lily again, spoken with a mixture of pity and helplessness. He felt a strange pull, an unfamiliar urge to intervene. He didn't know this Lily, didn't know anything about her situation, but the idea of a woman being sold against her stirred something deep inside him. He thought of his mother, who had always taught him to stand up for what was right, to protect the vulnerable. But interfering would be complicated. He was a rancher, not a knight-errant. He had no experience with delicate situations, with women. He was more comfortable mending fences than meddling in other people's affairs. Besides, it wasn't his business. Was it? He looked down at the pile of chips in front of him, the weight of them suddenly heavier than before. This money could change his life, could secure his future, could finally give him the chance to expand his ranch. But the whispers about Lily kept swirling in his mind, a persistent, nagging voice that refused to be silenced. He knew what was right. He always had. But doing what was right, that was the hard part. He clenched his jaw, his knuckles white. He didn't want to get involved. He really didn't. But he couldn't shake the feeling that if he walked away, he'd be betraying something fundamental within himself. He stood up, the chair scraping against the wooden floor, the sound cutting through the murmur of the saloon. All eyes turned to him. He took a deep breath, trying to ignore the sudden pounding of his heart. He had a choice to make, and he knew, deep down, that he already knew what it was. An auction of despair. The air inside the auction hall hung thick with the smell of stale beer, sweat, and desperation. Sawdust crunched under Dusty's boots as he awkwardly navigated the throng of men, each one a caricature of grim intent. The room was dimly lit by flickering gas lamps that cast long, dancing shadows, making the scene feel even more sinister. He felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. This wasn't an auction of horses or land. It was an auction of a person. Caleb Harding stood on a makeshift stage, his arm possessively looped around a young woman. Lily Mae Harding. Even from across the room, Dusty could see the tremor in her hands, the way she avoided eye contact, her gaze fixed on the floor. Caleb, on the other hand, beamed with a false joviality, his eyes glinting with avarice. Gentlemen, gather round. Caleb's voice boomed, amplified by the hall's acoustics. Here we have Lily Mae, a woman of exceptional qualities. She's a hard worker, a good cook, and, well, she's pleasing to the eye, ain't she? A smattering of crude laughter rippled through the crowd. Lily flinched, pulling away slightly from Caleb's grasp, but he only tightened his grip, his fingers digging into her arm. Dusty felt a surge of anger, hot and unfamiliar. He'd seen cattle treated better. He clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He had to do something. The auctioneer, a wiry man with a voice like a rusty hinge, began the bidding. All right, gentlemen, what am I bid for this fine young woman? Let's start at $50. A few hands went up tentatively. 50, 75, 100. The numbers climbed slowly, each bid feeling like a hammer blow to Dusty's conscience. He watched Lily's face, trying to gauge her reaction. She remained stoic, her expression unreadable, but he saw a flicker of something, fear, resignation, perhaps even a spark of defiance, in her eyes. Caleb continued to leer, egging on the bidders. Come on, gentlemen, don't be shy. She's worth far more than that. Think of the possibilities. His words dripped with a vile suggestiveness that made Dusty's skin crawl. The bidding stalled at $200. The auctioneer looked around expectantly, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Going once, going twice. Dusty's heart pounded in his chest. $200 wouldn't even buy a decent mare. This beautiful, hurting woman was worth more than all the money in his pocket. He hadn't planned this. He hadn't considered the consequences. But he couldn't stand by and watch. 300, Dusty blurted out, his voice cracking with nerves. All eyes turned to him. He felt a blush creep up his neck as he met the surprised stares of the crowd. Caleb's grin faltered. Dusty Rivers, he sneered. Didn't know you had that kind of money, boy. Going once for 300, the auctioneer announced, a hint of surprise in his voice. A burly man in the front row raised his hand. 350. Dusty's stomach dropped. He hadn't anticipated this. He glanced at Lily, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. He couldn't back down now. 400, he shouted, his voice stronger this time, fueled by a sudden resolve. The burly man hesitated, then shook his head. I'm out. The auctioneer's hammer hovered in the air. Going once, going twice sold. To Dusty Rivers for $400. A collective murmur rippled through the hall. Dusty felt a wave of relief wash over him, quickly followed by a surge of panic. What had he done? Caleb's face was a mask of fury. He shoved Lily towards Dusty, his eyes burning with resentment. She's your problem now, Rivers. Enjoy. Lily stumbled, nearly falling, but Dusty reached out and steadied her. Her skin was cold beneath his touch. She didn't speak, didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the sawdust-covered floor. He gently guided her off the stage, away from the leering eyes and the oppressive atmosphere of the auction hall. As they walked, he couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into, and what Lily thought of it all. New beginnings, uncertain steps. The buckboard rattled along the dusty track, each jolt sending a fresh wave of anxiety through Lily. Beside her, Dusty Rivers navigated the ruts with a practiced ease that seemed at odds with the nervous energy radiating from him. He kept glancing at her, a hopeful, almost pleading look in his eyes, then quickly averting his gaze to the horizon. The landscape gradually shifted from scrubby plains to rolling hills dotted with grazing cattle. In the distance, nestled against a backdrop of jagged mountains, a cluster of buildings appeared. That's the ranch, Dusty said, his voice a little too loud, as if he were trying to fill the silence. As they drew closer, Lily took in the details. A sprawling, single-story house constructed of rough-hewn logs stood at the center, surrounded by a barn, stables, and various outbuildings. A windmill creaked rhythmically in the breeze, and chickens pecked lazily in the yard. It was peaceful, utterly unlike the oppressive atmosphere of the Harding farm. Dusty pulled the buckboard to a halt in front of the house. He hopped down and extended a hand to Lily. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted it, her fingers brushing against his calloused palm. The contact sent a strange flutter through her, a mixture of apprehension and something she couldn't quite name. "Welcome to Rivers Ranch," Dusty said, his smile wide but slightly strained. "It ain't much, but it's home." Lily stepped onto the porch, her worn boots scuffing against the weathered wood. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, a comforting aroma that tugged at something deep inside her. "Come on," Dusty said, gesturing towards the open doorway. "Let me show you around." The interior of the house was surprisingly spacious and clean. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, and sunlight streamed through windows draped with simple muslin curtains. The furniture was sturdy and functional, but there was a sense of warmth and order that was absent from her previous home. Dusty led her down a short hallway to a small room at the end. "This is yours," he said, pushing open the door. Lily stepped inside. The room was sparsely furnished with a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a wash basin. A patchwork quilt lay neatly folded on the bed, its colors faded but cheerful. A single window looked out onto a small garden filled with wildflowers. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. A wave of emotion washed over Lily, threatening to break through her carefully constructed stoicism. She swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that pricked at her eyes. I hope it's all right," Dusty stammered, shuffling his feet. "I try to make it comfortable." Lily turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. An awkward silence descended between them. Dusty cleared his throat. "Sup'll be ready in a bit. Mrs. Olson, she keeps things running around here. Good cook, too." He paused, searching for something else to say. "Well, make yourself at home. Holler if you need anything." He backed out of the room, nearly tripping over his own feet. Lily watched him go, then turned back to the room. She ran a hand over the soft fabric of the quilt, then sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress sagged slightly beneath her weight. This was it, a new beginning. But as she gazed out the window at the unfamiliar landscape, a sense of unease settled over her. She was free from Caleb, but she was also completely dependent on a man she barely knew. What did he expect from her? What would her life be like here? The questions swirled in her mind, unanswered and unsettling. Only time would reveal the answers. Finding her place. The sun was a painter, splashing gold across the valley when Lily woke. She hadn't slept well, the unfamiliar bed a battlefield for her anxieties, but the air smelled clean and sweet, a balm compared to the stale smoke of the saloon. Dusty was already gone. A note, weighted down by a smooth river stone, sat on the kitchen table. "Gonna check on the north pasture. Breakfast stuff in the fridge. Make yourself at home." Make herself at home. The words felt heavy, laden with an impossible expectation. Where was home, anyway? She found eggs, bacon, and day-old biscuits in the icebox. After a meager breakfast, Lily wandered outside. The garden, a riot of unruly green, beckoned. Weeds choked the tomato plants, and the herbs looked thirsty. Back at the saloon, she'd bartered her way out of more than one scrape by tending the owner's prized rose bushes. Gardening was something she understood. Dusty's tools were haphazardly stacked in the shed. She chose a trowel and began to dig, her movements economical and precise. The soil, rich and dark, yielded easily to her touch. Hours passed. She weeded, watered, and pruned, coaxing the neglected plants back to life. The rhythmic work soothed her, a familiar comfort in a world turned upside down. Dusty found her there in the late afternoon, sweat darkening the back of her thin cotton dress, dirt smudged on her cheek. The garden was transformed. Rows were neat, the vegetables stood tall, and the herbs released a fragrant perfume into the air. He stopped, his jaw slack. "Lily, I didn't know you had a green thumb." She shrugged, avoiding his gaze. Just something to do. Well, it's beautiful. Thank you. His voice was rough with a sincerity that made her stomach clench. The next few days fell into a pattern. Dusty left early, tending to the ranch. Lily cared for the house and the garden. She scrubbed floors until they gleamed, mended fences with a surprising aptitude, and even managed to repair the sputtering water pump with a wrench she found in the barn. She moved with a quiet competence that belied her fragile appearance. Dusty watched her, a slow dawning of amazement in his eyes. He'd thought he was rescuing a damsel in distress, but Lily was no delicate flower. She was a survivor, resourceful and strong. One evening, as they sat down to a dinner of stewed rabbit and potatoes, Dusty frowned. This tastes different. Better. Lily merely stirred her stew. Less time, more rosemary, and a touch of vinegar brightens the flavor. He blinked. You changed the recipe? Just a little. He ate in silence for a moment, then cleared his throat. You know, Mrs. Henderson, who used to cook for me, she always made this stew too bland. I never knew what to do about it. Lily looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time, without flinching. Sometimes, the smallest changes make the biggest difference. Dusty pondered that for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. He had a feeling she wasn't just talking about stew. He still felt awkward around her, unsure how to bridge the gap between their forced arrangement and any semblance of genuine connection. But seeing her work, hearing her quiet suggestions, he began to see a glimmer of hope, not just for her future, but for his as well. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected arrangement could blossom into something more than just a business transaction. But only time and a whole lot of courage would tell. The fury of the storm. The wind began as a sibilant murmur, teasing the cottonwoods along the creek's edge with its deceptively gentle touch. Yet, a prickle of unease traced Dusty's spine as he mended fence by the south pasture, a feeling distinct from any splinter's sting. The once boundless azure canvas of the sky had surrendered to a livid purple, bruised with roiling masses of cloud gathering on the horizon. He straightened, eyes drawn to the encroaching gloom. Damn, he grumbled, punctuating his assessment with a brown stream that landed in the parched earth. A storm was brewing, an ugly one by the looks of it. Tools gathered with practiced economy. He prioritized the livestock. The cattle, already skittish, clustered near the barn, a bovine huddle seeking shelter. They needed corralling before the deluge commenced. A sharp whistle brought Buster and Belle bounding to his side, tails thumping in anxious rhythm as they sensed the shift in his demeanor, guiding the herd towards the barn. Their mournful lowing rose with the approaching thunder's growl. He caught sight of Lily framed in the doorway's light on the porch, a slender silhouette. Her expression remained an enigma. "Lily," he bellowed above the rising wind's lament. "Get inside. It's turning nasty." She remained rooted, though her grip visibly tightened on the porch railing. No time for debate. He focused on ushering the last of the cattle into the barn, their hooves a percussive stampede on the wooden floor. With all secure, he wrestled the heavy doors shut, the resounding thud swallowed by the wind's escalating shriek. He sprinted toward the house, the first heavy drops exploding against his skin. Lily still stood sentinel on the porch, eyes fixed on the heavens. "What are you doing?" he demanded, tugging her arm to pull her inside. She offered mild resistance. "Just watching," she murmured, voice lost in the tempest's crescendo. He slammed the door, muting some of the clamor. "It's not safe out there. This feels like more than just a shower." Finally, she met his gaze, her eyes holding a gravity that belied her youth. "It's a twister," she stated, her tone devoid of inflection. Dusty's brow furrowed. "A twister? What makes you say that?" "The clouds," she indicated, gesturing towards the window. "See the rotation? The way the wind spirals? It's not just force, it's suction." He followed her gaze, scrutinizing the turbulent sky. Weather lore wasn't his forte, but he trusted Lily's intuition. She possessed a sense, a perception beyond his own. "Damn it," he reiterated, the curse laced with urgency. The outbuildings demanded attention. The chicken coop, the tool shed. "Stay put," he instructed Lily. "And if you see anything anything at all shout. Oilskins retrieved from the wall hook, he plunged back into the maelstrom. The rain descended in torrents, propelled by a gale, threatening to wrest his hat away. He battled his way to the chicken coop, bolstering the door with a hefty beam. Inside, the hens erupted in panicked squawks, huddled tight for security. Next, the shed. The roof, aged and worn, required anchoring. He wrestled with the rope, his fingers growing stiff and clumsy. A blinding flash of lightning momentarily bleached the landscape in stark relief, followed by a thunderclap that seemed to split the very air. He risked a glance back at the house. Lily remained at her post, watching. Her face was ashen, yet her gaze remained unwavering. Shed secured, his heart hammered against his ribs. He had to regain the house to ensure Lily's safety. The storm was escalating, and a premonition whispered that the worst was yet to come. As he raced homeward, a branch, thick as his torso, sheared off a tree and thudded to earth just feet from him. He stumbled, finding purchase on the fence. This wasn't merely a storm. It was an elemental rage, a force unleashed, and they were standing squarely in its path. Through the night, the wind howled like a banshee, clawing at the barn's weathered planks. Dusty wrestled with a heavy timber, trying to wedge it against a weakened support beam. Rain lashed against his face, blinding him momentarily. "Damn it all," he muttered, spitting out a mouthful of water. "Here," Lily said, her voice barely audible above the storm's fury. She appeared beside him, surprisingly strong as she helped him maneuver the timber into place. Her face was pale, illuminated by the intermittent flashes of lightning, but her eyes were steady, focused. Dusty grunted with effort, finally securing the timber with a handful of nails he'd grabbed from his pocket. "Thanks. Didn't think you had that kind of strength." Lily didn't reply, simply moved to the next weakened section of the barn, pointing to a spot where the wind was visibly bowing the wood inward. He followed, grabbing another timber. They worked in a silent, frantic rhythm, their movements dictated by the escalating violence of the storm. Each slam of the hammer, each grunt of exertion, was a small act of defiance against the raging elements. As they finished reinforcing the barn, a new sound emerged from the maelstrom, a low, guttural roar that vibrated through the ground. Dusty felt a knot of fear tighten in his gut. He knew that sound. "Cellar," Lily said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Now." He didn't argue. He grabbed her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around her surprisingly delicate ones, and pulled her toward the house. The wind tried to rip them apart, but they leaned into each other, a human anchor against the storm's relentless assault. Inside the house, Dusty fumbled with the cellar door, his hands slick with rain and sweat. He got it open and practically shoved Lily down the narrow steps. He followed, slamming the door shut behind them, plunging them into near darkness. The cellar was damp and smelled of earth and mildew. Dusty lit a lantern, casting a flickering circle of light on the rough-hewn stone walls. Lily stood silently, her back against the wall, her eyes wide and unblinking. The roaring grew louder, closer. The house shuddered. Dusty grabbed Lily, pulling her down to the floor beside him. He wrapped his arms around her, a gesture born of instinct rather than intention. He felt her body trembling against his. "It's coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He held her tighter, bracing himself for the inevitable. The roar intensified, becoming a deafening cacophony of wind and destruction. The house groaned, timbers creaking and snapping. The air pressure dropped, making it hard to breathe. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the roaring began to fade. An eerie silence descended, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water. Dusty cautiously raised his head. The storm had passed. They were in the eye. He loosened his grip on Lily, feeling a strange mix of relief and embarrassment. He hadn't meant to hold her so close, but in that moment, she had been his anchor, just as much as he had been hers. He cleared his throat. "You okay?" She nodded, her gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond him. "It will be back. Worse." He didn't doubt her. He stood, his muscles aching, his nerves frayed. We should check the house. They climbed the steps, pushing open the cellar door. The scene that greeted them was one of devastation. Trees were uprooted, fences were flattened, and debris was scattered everywhere. The house was still standing, but it had clearly taken a beating. Dusty surveyed the damage, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. It would take days, maybe weeks, to clean up this mess. Lily stood beside him, her expression unreadable. He glanced at her, noticing the faint tremor in her hands. She was scared. He reached out and took her hand again, offering a silent reassurance. This time, she didn't pull away. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the sound of the wind picking up again in the distance. The back of the storm was coming. But for now, in this brief, fragile moment of calm, they were together. Deception unveiled. The dust hadn't even settled from the storm when a buckboard rattled up the long drive, disturbing the relative peace. Dusty, still stiff from wrestling beams, watched from the porch as a man with a wide, toothy grin and a bowler hat hopped down. He adjusted his checkered suit and approached with an outstretched hand. "Name's Silas Blackwood, at your service. Here are your Dusty Rivers. Got something might interest you, Mr. Rivers." His voice was oily smooth, like slick-back hair. Dusty, always eager for an opportunity, especially after the barn repairs, shook the man's hand. "What's that, Mr. Blackwood?" "Prime land, Mr. Rivers. Just west of yours. Fertile soil, access to the creek, the works. Owner's looking to sell quick, and I happen to have the deed right here." Blackwood patted a leather satchel at his side. Dusty's eyes widened. Expanding the ranch had been a long-held dream, and this land was crucial for grazing. "Let's see it." Blackwood produced a thick, official-looking document, complete with seals and ornate script. Dusty traced the lines with a calloused finger, squinting at the unfamiliar legal jargon. He trusted his gut more than documents, and his gut was telling him opportunity. Lily emerged from the house, drawn by the unfamiliar voice. She stood silently on the porch, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Blackwood. The storm had washed away some of her initial fear, replacing it with a quiet observation. She watched everything, missed nothing. The owner's asking a fair price, a real steal, considering the potential. Blackwood continued, his eyes gleaming. He named a figure, and Dusty's breath hitched. It was a significant sum, even for him, but worth it if the land was as good as Blackwood claimed. "I'll have to think about it," Dusty said, trying to sound nonchalant, though his heart hammered against his ribs. He wanted this land. He needed this land. Blackwood chuckled. "Think fast, Mr. Rivers. There are other interested parties. This opportunity won't last." He snapped the deed shut. Dusty paced, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. He pictured the cattle grazing on the lush pasture, the creek winding through the property. It was perfect. Lily spoke, her voice soft but clear. "May I see the deed?" Blackwood hesitated, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "It's complicated legal stuff, Mississippi. I doubt you'd understand." "Humor me," she said, her gaze unwavering. Dusty, intrigued by her sudden interest, nodded. "Show her, Mr. Blackwood." With a sigh that seemed exaggerated, Blackwood reluctantly handed over the document. Lily took it, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest moment. He seemed to flinch. She carried the deed over to the porch where the sunlight streamed through, illuminating the parchment. She examined it with a focus that belied her quiet demeanor. Dusty watched her, a knot forming in his stomach. He'd been so caught up in the possibility of expansion that he hadn't considered the possibility of being swindled. Lily's brow furrowed. She ran a finger over one of the seals, then another. Finally, she looked up, her eyes meeting Dusty's. "This is a forgery." Blackwood sputtered, his face flushing red. "That's absurd. I obtained this deed legally." Lily pointed to the seals. "The ink is too fresh, and the paper is not the same quality as the original document from that era. Also, the supposed signature of Judge Thompson, he signed with his left hand. Not right. I remember." Blackwood's bravado crumbled. He stammered, searching for an explanation, but found none. He snatched the deed back, stuffing it into his satchel. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Rivers," he said, his voice losing its smooth veneer. "A big mistake." He scrambled back onto his buckboard and whipped the horses, disappearing down the drive in a cloud of dust, leaving a silence heavier than the departing storm. Dusty stared after him, his face pale. He turned to Lily, his voice thick with emotion. How did you know?" Lily shrugged, her expression almost apologetic. "I saw a lot of documents. For various reasons. You learn to notice things." Dusty stepped forward and took her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "You saved me, Lily. You saved me from losing everything." He paused, searching for the right words. "Thank you." The shadow returns. The following days settled into a rhythm, a fragile peace woven with the mundane. Dusty, still reeling from Blackwood's audacity, found himself watching Lily. Not with suspicion, but with a burgeoning respect. She moved through the ranch house with a quiet efficiency, tending to the small vegetable garden she'd started near the creek, mending tears in his worn saddlebags with surprising dexterity. He even caught her humming a tuneless melody while she kneaded dough for bread, a sound as comforting as the crackling fire in the hearth. He tried to thank her properly for exposing Blackwood, but the words felt clumsy, inadequate. Instead, he bought her a bolt of sky-blue cotton from town, a small offering to replace the drab fabric she'd arrived with. She'd accepted it with a curt nod, her eyes betraying a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. Hope, perhaps. The piece shattered like glass on a dirt floor with the arrival of a dust-choked wagon. Caleb Harding sat perched on the driver's seat, his face a thundercloud. Beside him, a wiry man with a shotgun cradled across his lap. Dusty felt a knot tighten in his gut. He'd hoped Caleb would simply disappear, lick his wounds, and move on. He should have known better. Lily, who had been hanging laundry, froze, her hands clutching a damp shirt. The humming ceased. Her face, usually composed, paled. Dusty strode out, his boots kicking up dust. "Harding," he said, his voice flat. "What brings you back?" Caleb spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the parched earth. "You know damn well why I'm here, Rivers. You stole what was rightfully mine." "She's not property, Harding. She's a person." Dusty's voice was firm, but a tremor of unease ran through him. Caleb was bigger than him, meaner, and he had a shotgun. "Don't you get high and mighty with me," Caleb snarled, his eyes fixed on Lily. "Get your lazy ass over here, girl. You're coming home." Lily didn't move. She stood rooted to the spot, her knuckles white as she gripped the shirt. Dusty saw the fear etched on her face, a stark contrast to the defiance she'd shown in the past few days. "She stays here." Dusty stepped forward, placing himself between Caleb and Lily. He was acutely aware of the shotgun and the cold, calculating gaze of the man holding it. "I want her fair and square." Caleb let out a harsh, guttural laugh. "One? You think you won something? She's a burden, Rivers, a stone around your neck. She can't talk right, can't think right. Useless, that's what she is." Lily flinched, her eyes dropping to the ground. Dusty's anger surged. He wanted to wipe the smug look off Caleb's face, to silence the venomous words that were tearing at Lily's spirit. "That's enough," Dusty said, his voice low and dangerous. "Get off my property, Harding, before I make you." Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You think you're so high and mighty, Rivers? You think you can just buy your way out of anything? You made a mistake taking her. A big one. She's more trouble than she's worth, and you'll learn that soon enough. And when you do, I'll be waiting." He jerked his head towards Lily. "Worthless baggage," he spat. "Just like her mama." Lily gasped, her face crumpling. Dusty saw a tear trace a path down her cheek. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to charge at Caleb. He knew it would be a mistake. He glanced at the man with the shotgun, whose eyes hadn't left him. Caleb snapped the reins, turning the wagon around. "Enjoy her while you can, Rivers," he called out, his voice laced with malice. "This ain't over." The wagon rattled away, leaving a cloud of dust and a chilling silence in its wake. Dusty turned to Lily. She was still standing by the clothesline, her shoulders shaking. He walked towards her, a wave of protectiveness washing over him. He didn't know what to say, how to comfort her. He only knew that he couldn't let Caleb Harding take her back. Not now. Not ever. Standing tall, Lily stood with a spine of tempered steel, sunlight dancing in the gold flecks usually veiled in her gaze. Caleb Harding, his complexion a roadmap of fury, choked out. Ingrate. After everything. Her voice, though hushed, resonated with newfound resolve. Everything? You bartered me, Caleb, like a worn-out tool. You drained me dry and offered only misery in return. A ripple of whispers moved through the onlookers. Drawn by the initial clamor, the townsfolk now witnessed a spectacle that curdled curiosity into something far more sinister as Caleb's words oozed possessive cruelty. Dusty shifted, dry grass whispering under his boots. He hadn't envisioned this showdown as a public affair, but retreat was no longer an option. He moved to Lily's side, a silent bulwark against the storm. Caleb's gaze lashed out, eyes like chips of flint. Playing knight-errant, Rivers? You've bought yourself a heap of trouble. She belongs to me. It's a done deal. She belongs to no one. Dusty countered, his tone a low growl. She's a person, Caleb, not a possession. Turning to Lily, his voice softened. You don't have to say a word you don't want to, Lily. I won't let him force you. A spark of something akin to dawning hope lit Lily's eyes as she met his gaze. She squeezed his hand, a subtle tremor of gratitude that spoke volumes. Drawing a steadying breath, she faced Caleb, her shoulders squared. I'm not going anywhere with you. My home is here. Caleb's face twisted, cords standing out on his neck. You'll regret this, Lily. You all will. He surged forward, but human barricade erupted before him. Old Man Hemlock, the blacksmith, a veritable mountain with anvil-like hands, planted himself firmly. Enough, Harding. Your welcome mat's worn thin around here. A chorus of dissenting voices rose, gathering momentum. Martha Olson, the baker, stood arms crossed, her expression a thundercloud. Even Sheriff Brody, not known for his haste, edged closer, his hand hovering near his sidearm. The air vibrated with tension. Dusty felt Lily trembling beside him, his grip tightening on her hand, offering solace. He studied her face, pale yet firm, and a revelation struck him with unexpected force. His feelings transcended mere protection. He loved her, her quiet fortitude, her keen observation, her untapped potential. He loved the way she transformed his house into a haven, her perception of things he consistently overlooked. He turned to Caleb, his voice amplified by conviction. She's staying here, Caleb, with me, because I love her. The declaration hung in the air, stark in its simplicity and honesty. A gasp escaped Lily. Stunned into silence, Caleb reeled backward, his face a tableau of rage and incredulity. The crowd pressed in, forcing Caleb back towards his wagon. The message was undeniable. He had overstayed his welcome. Humiliated and vanquished, Caleb scrambled into his wagon, spitting venom as he lashed the horses into a wild gallop. The wagon careened away, leaving a choking cloud of dust. When the air cleared, an awkward hush descended. Eyes shifted from Dusty to Lily, a mixture of curiosity and concern etched on their faces. Dusty remained oblivious to their scrutiny, focused solely on Lily. He turned, cupping her face in his hands. Are you all right? Lily nodded, tears brimming. Thank you, Dusty. He drew her into a close embrace, holding her tightly. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. A promise of forever. The dust hadn't settled from Caleb's hasty departure before Lily was left with the bitter taste of relief, mingling with apprehension. Dusty's grasp on her hand was a quiet promise, a bulwark against the lingering shadows. He's gone for good, Dusty stated, the words a low growl of resolve. I'll guarantee it. A wan smile touched Lily's lips. Thank you, Dusty, for everything. He framed her face, callous thumbs smoothing the delicate skin of her cheeks. Don't thank me. I'm the one who should be begging forgiveness. I was blind. Past is past, she murmured, instinctively seeking the comfort of his touch. This ends now, he vowed, his gaze unwavering. Every single day, I'll make amends. The days that followed were a vibrant tapestry woven with newfound tenderness. Dusty, shedding his usual taciturn demeanor, lavished her with affection. He guided her on horseback through the undulating ranchlands, unveiling hidden glens where waterfalls cascaded and meadows burst with colors she'd never noticed. Her room became a sanctuary, filled with the soothing perfume of lavender and roses, a constant fragrant reminder of his devotion. One twilight, as they shared the porch swing, watching the sunset blaze across the horizon, Dusty turned, his eyes reflecting the fiery hues. "Lily," he began, a tremor in his voice, "I haven't always been easy to live with. I've been guarded. But you've unlocked something dormant inside me. A part one thought lost forever." He inhaled deeply, his gaze locked on hers. "I love you, Lily, beyond words, and I want a lifetime to prove it." A surge of joy, an emotion she hadn't dared to entertain, flooded Lily's heart. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she clasped his hand. "I love you too, Dusty," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I knew I could." Dusty drew her close, enveloping her in an embrace that spoke volumes. "Then be my wife, Lily," he murmured against her hair. "Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy. Let me give you the world." Without hesitation, Lily nodded, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. "Yes, Dusty, 1,000 times yes." News of their approaching nuptials rippled through town, a welcome surprise. Despite the unconventional start to their relationship, the townsfolk were genuinely pleased for them. They witnessed the transformation in Dusty, the way his rough edges softened in Lily's presence. They recognized the quiet fortitude within her that had captivated him. Preparations began in earnest. Mrs. Henderson, the town's skilled seamstress, offered to craft Lily's gown, a vision in ivory lace adorned with delicate pearls. Mr. Johnson, the local baker, volunteered a towering confection of vanilla and chocolate, decorated with intricate sugar flowers. The wedding day dawned, clear and bright. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of wildflowers and freshly mown hay. The ceremony unfolded in the garden behind the ranch house, a charming scene embellished with floral garlands and twinkling lanterns. As Lily walked down the aisle, escorted by Jed, Dusty's faithful foreman, her heart hammered against her ribs. Dusty stood at the altar, his eyes shining with adoration. Dressed in a dark suit, he looked strikingly handsome, a far cry from his usual rugged attire. The ceremony was brief, yet deeply touching, filled with sincere vows and promises of enduring love. With the pronouncement of husband and wife, Dusty claimed Lily in a kiss, a profound and passionate seal upon their union. The ensuing reception was a vibrant celebration. Laughter echoed as friends and neighbors offered their congratulations. Dusty and Lily danced, lost in their own private world, their gazes intertwined. As the evening waned, Dusty escorted Lily away from the revelry to the highest point of the ranch. Standing hand in hand, they watched the stars emerge in the vast, inky canvas above. "This is it, Lily," Dusty said, his voice hushed with wonder. "This is our forever." Lily nestled against him, finding solace and security in his embrace. "Forever," she echoed, her heart brimming with joy. "I love the sound of that."